The ink on our marriage license was barely dry when the message came. I had just finished signing the last vendor checks at the reception hall, my hand cramping from the paperwork that follows even a modest wedding. The venue was a converted warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and string lights. My new wife Elena was upstairs in the bridal suite, supposedly changing out of her dress. We had a car coming at midnight to take us to the airport for our honeymoon in Santorini. I felt the buzz in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "Check your email. Now! Before you leave for the airport." I should have deleted it. I should have gone upstairs to my wife, helped her with her luggage, pretended that the past 12 hours of celebration meant what they were supposed to mean. Instead, I opened my email. The message had no text, just a link to a cloud storage folder. My training as a cybersecurity consultant screamed warnings. Never click unknown links. Never compromise your security for curiosity. But this was about Elena. I clicked. The folder contained photos, documents, bank statements, and a video file dated 3 days ago, labeled with coordinates. I recognized the format immediately. Security camera footage. The video showed a luxury apartment building downtown, the kind with a doorman and floor-to-ceiling windows. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. A black town car pulled up. Elena stepped out, wearing the same navy dress she'd worn when she told me she was having dinner with her sister. She wasn't alone. A man followed her. Tall, athletic, dark hair graying at the temples. Tailored coat, expensive shoes. They didn't touch as they walked to the entrance, but they moved with the unconscious synchronization of people who know each other's rhythms. The doorman greeted them by name. "Good evening, Mr. Vance. Miss Cole." 17 minutes later, the bedroom lights of a corner unit on the 14th floor went dark. The living room stayed illuminated for another hour. I closed the video. My hands were shaking. I scrolled through the other files. Bank statements showing transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Property records for the apartment deeded to a shell corporation. Photos of them at restaurants I didn't know, on a yacht, at events I hadn't been invited to. The earliest photo was dated 14 months ago. We'd been engaged for 8 of those months. My phone buzzed again. "There's more. Come to the address in your GPS alone. Don't tell her." The location was 10 minutes away, a converted textile mill in the warehouse district. Every instinct said this was a setup. But I needed to understand the full scope of what I was facing. I texted Elena. "Running late with final paperwork. Meet you at the car in 45. I watched her response appear. "Hurry. I miss you already." The meeting took place on a parking structure roof. A woman stepped from the shadows, 60s, silver hair, the posture of someone used to authority. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "my name is Margaret Chen. I used to be Julian Vance's business partner. Before he decided I was more useful as an enemy." She handed me a folder. "Your wife isn't just having an affair. She's part of a strategy that's been in development for 2 years. The first document was a prenuptial agreement between Elena and Vance, dated 18 months ago. She would marry someone else, someone stable, respectable, within a specific time frame. In exchange, Vance would transfer assets into a trust in her name, protecting them from creditors circling his empire. The marriage would provide legitimacy, a cover story. When the time was right, she would divorce the mark and return to Vance, her fortune intact. I read it 3 times, looking for the loophole. There wasn't one. My marriage wasn't an expression of love. It was a financial instrument designed to shield a criminal. "Why tell me?" I asked. "Vance destroyed my company. He used my daughter to access my files, then left her with nothing. I've spent 3 years building a case against him. Your wife was the connection between his legitimate business and his illegal activities. but she was too careful to approach directly. So you waited until she made a mistake. Until she got greedy. Vance faces indictment. His lawyers told him to move the money now. So he pushed her to accelerate the wedding. Faster means sloppier. She handed me another document. A transcript of Elena and Vance discussing me like a project. My habits, my vulnerabilities, my likely reactions. They'd planned for me to discover the affair eventually, to be heartbroken but not suspicious, to accept a narrative of simple infidelity rather than looking deeper. What do you want? I asked. Cooperation. The documents you have can annul the marriage on grounds of fraud. They can start a criminal investigation. But to really stop him, I need more. I need you to go through with the honeymoon. Play the happy groom. Gather evidence from her devices, her accounts. Give us time to trace the money, build a federal case. You want me to spend 2 weeks pretending to love a woman who used me as a financial instrument. I want you to choose justice over immediate satisfaction. She disappeared down the stairwell. I stood alone, the folder in my hands, the city lights spread below like a circuit board I was only beginning to understand. I looked at my watch. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until the car arrived. I could walk away, consult a lawyer, protect myself. Or I could get in the car and play the role they'd written for me, but with a different ending. I found Elena in the lobby, her suitcase beside her. She looked up, her face transforming with relief and affection, and something I now recognized as calculation. There you are, she said, stepping forward to kiss me. I tasted champagne on her lips, smelled the perfume I'd bought her. I was starting to worry. Last-minute vendor issues. I lied. Nothing that can't wait until we get back. The car pulled up. I watched Elena get in, her movements graceful, assured, the movements of someone who believed she was in control. I followed, settling into the seat beside her, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. She took my hand, interlacing our fingers, and I felt the weight of her ring against my palm, the symbol of a promise she'd never intended to keep. I squeezed back and began my performance. The flight to Santorini took 14 hours. While Elena slept against my shoulder in the Athens airport lounge, I reviewed Margaret's documents, memorizing details, planning my approach. The secure messaging app showed one message: trust established. Proceeding to phase 2. The villa was everything promised: whitewashed walls, infinity pool, caldera views. Elena spent the first afternoon photographing everything for Instagram while I explored the property's Wi-Fi network, finding vulnerabilities that would let me monitor her devices. My professional skills turned against my personal life. The irony wasn't lost on me. The first 3 days followed a pattern. Mornings by the pool, afternoons exploring, evenings at restaurants where staff knew her by name. She was relaxed, happy, affectionate in ways that would have thrilled me a week ago. Now I watched her performance with a critical eye, noting how she touched my arm when she wanted attention, how she said my name like a caress, how she deflected questions about her past with vivid but unverifiable stories. On the 4th day, I found my opening. A message made her tense during breakfast. She excused herself to the bathroom, and I used 30 seconds to install monitoring software on her phone. Elegant, undetectable, the kind of tool that would cost me my license if used on a client. The message was from Vance. Timeline moved up. Package ready for transfer. Confirm receipt. Her response. Confirmed. Proceeding as discussed. Mark compliant, no suspicions. Mark. That was me. Reduced to a variable in their financial model. That night, I accessed her cloud storage. I found financial records, transfer schedules, assets moving from Vance to her through shell companies. I found emails planning their future reunion after my divorce. And I found the insurance policy. A life insurance policy on me, Elena as beneficiary, premiums paid from an account I didn't know existed. The payout was substantial, enough to make my death profitable rather than merely convenient. An accident on the honeymoon, perhaps. A drowning, a fall. I was a cybersecurity consultant, not a field agent. My death would be plausible, unfortunate, easily explained by travel statistics. I copied everything. I sent it to Margaret, and I made a decision. The honeymoon would continue, but the pretense of ignorance was over. I began planning my exit, my counter-move, my transformation from mark to prosecutor. The remaining days passed in a blur of performance and preparation. I smiled for photos knowing they'd become evidence of the happy couple, the unsuspecting groom. I made love to her with mechanical precision, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction that every touch was being documented. I waited, patient as a predator, for the moment to reveal myself. We returned home on Sunday. The flight was uneventful, Elena sleeping, while I reviewed the case file Margaret had assembled. The grand jury was convening in 2 weeks. My evidence would secure an indictment for conspiracy to commit murder. The insurance policy changed everything. Monday morning, I arranged to be alone in our apartment. Elena had a meeting with attorneys about the next phase of asset transfer. At least that's what the monitoring software showed. I packed my essentials, secured my accounts, prepared annulment documentation. The confrontation was not dramatic. I didn't shout or accuse. I simply spread the evidence across our kitchen table, the prenuptial agreement with Vance, the bank transfers, the insurance policy, the emails planning my death. She didn't cry or beg. She simply sat down, color draining from her face, and asked how long I'd known. "Since the wedding night," I said. "Since I realized everything I believed about us was a construction, a performance designed to serve someone else's interests." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You needed a respectable husband to legitimize hidden assets. You studied me, played me with skill I acknowledge even as I despise it. And when the time was right, you were going to dispose of me, through divorce or something more permanent. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Julian said you were smart. He said you'd figure it out eventually, but by then it would be too late. He said you'd be too embarrassed to fight, too proud to admit you'd been fooled. Julian underestimated me. He thought I was a mark, a victim, a means to an end. He didn't understand that some people, when backed into a corner, don't break. They fight. They strategize. They turn the tables." I handed her the cooperation agreement I'd signed with federal prosecutors, the subpoena requiring her grand jury appearance, the notification that her accounts were frozen. "You have a choice. Cooperate, tell them everything about Vance's operations, hope for leniency. Or protect him, take the fall, spend 20 years in prison while he moves on to the next woman willing to sacrifice herself for his convenience." She looked at me with something I hadn't expected. "Respect?" "You played me," she said. "All that time in Santorini you knew. You were acting. I learned from the best." The arrest came 3 days later. Federal agents, simultaneous raids on Vance's office and our apartment. I watched them take her away, hands cuffed, face composed. I watched them lead Vance out, cameras flashing. Reporters shouting questions he wouldn't answer. I testified before the grand jury. I testified at the trial. I watched them convicted of conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, attempted murder. I watched them sentenced to prison terms that would keep them confined until old age. Then I walked away. I sold the apartment, changed my number, shifted my professional focus to the psychology of deception. I started consulting on the patterns that allow people to be used by those they trust. Sometimes I think about the wedding, the vows, the dancing, the promise of forever. I think about who I was then, the man who believed love was protection rather than vulnerability, trust was a gift rather than a risk. I mourn that man's innocence. But I don't mourn long. The man I am now is harder, more cautious, less easily moved. But he's more capable, more aware, more prepared for a world where the people closest to you might have the most to gain from your destruction. Elena sent a letter from prison 6 months after sentencing. Apologies, claims of real feelings developed during the performance. I didn't read past the first page. The words were just another script, another manipulation attempt. I filed it with the case documents and moved on. The rooftop where I met Margaret Chin is now a restaurant. I went there once, on the anniversary of my wedding that wasn't, and raised a glass to the woman who'd given me the tools to save myself. She died 6 months earlier, cancer taking her before the final verdict. But she'd known. We'd spoken once on a secure line. She said justice was its own reward, that stopping predators like Vance was worth more than any personal resolution. I think she was right. I think about her, and about the daughter whose reputation Vance destroyed, and about other Marks who weren't lucky enough to receive anonymous messages on their wedding nights. I think about the system I helped dismantle. And I think about Elena. Not with longing or hatred, but with clinical interest, the recognition of a dangerous species whose markings I now understand. She was beautiful, intelligent, patient, completely without conscience. She was everything I hadn't known to fear, and she taught me everything I needed to know about survival. I live alone now. I work too much. I take precautions others find excessive. I don't apologize. The world is full of people like Elena, like Vance, like the version of myself who believed love was safe. The only protection is vigilance, preparation, and the willingness to act when the moment comes. The moment came for me on my wedding night. I acted. I survived. And I learned that the story of betrayal is not a tragedy if the betrayed refuses to play victim. It's a different kind of story. About awakening. About transformation. About the person you become when you realize the only one you can truly trust is the one who looks back from the mirror, eyes open, finally seeing clearly. My name is Carter Hayes. I was married for 11 days. I was a Mark for 14 months. And I have been free ever since.